Madam President,
The senior senator from Michigan.
I'm not sure where to start, having just heard my colleague from Florida. I just have to say that who he is describing, I don't recognize either, because I don't recognize that at all of anyone that is here. And I just want to start by thanking my Democratic colleagues, first of all, for voting for the American Recovery Act that, among many other things, is helping to focus on ways to bring down the cost of food and our food supply chain to help fix it, and a number of other issues that unfortunately not one colleague on the Republican side voted for, not one. So we've heard a lot today about how we should be focusing on the needs of the American people. I think there'd be a collective amen from our side about that. And we would love to have our colleagues join us, frankly, in that effort. But nothing's more fundamental to our democracy than preserving our freedom to vote as Americans, and that's really what the debate and the votes are all about today. We know there are people willing to use violence to stop accurate, legal certifications of our national presidential election. And how do we know this? Because we were here. We were here a year ago on January 6th and witnessed the violence and the death and the destruction. We also know there's a coordinated Republican effort across the country to limit the freedom to vote and make it easier to intimidate and remove election officials who won't do their bidding. And how do I know this? Because it's happening in Michigan as I speak. Today's vote on the legislation in front of us is the fundamental act we must do to stop this destructive partisan movement. And we also know that in order to make this happen, we have to return the Senate to its original principle of majority vote. Our nation's founders had a lot of opinions about the type of country we should be and, the type of government we should have. And at times, the discussions got heated, and not just because it was summer in Philadelphia, Senator Casey, but they were actually wearing wool at the time, and so it got heated in a number of different ways. However, there was one thing they agreed on. Government should be run by the will of the majority, not a minority, not a king. They agreed on this because they saw what happened when a nation is held captive to the views of the minority. The very first Constitution of the United States, the Articles of Confederation, was frankly a dysfunctional mess. That's why they gathered in Philadelphia to try again and to get it right this time. And getting it right meant majority rule. James Madison said that the majority rule was fundamental to our democracy. Thomas Jefferson said that the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail. And in Federalist 22, Alexander Hamilton wrote a lengthy description of the problems that arise when a minority can override the will of the majority. The founders didn't have an opinion on the Senate filibuster because it didn't exist. It didn't exist. However, over time, senators figured out they could slow down legislation through unlimited debate. And we know that at first the filibuster was rarely used, mainly by Southern senators who wanted to block civil rights legislation. Yet over time, it's evolved from a procedural tool into a weapon, and we all know this. And this weapon is increasingly used to stop our nation from making progress on issues that are so important to the American people, so important to our families, and crucial to the future of our country. We're here today because the most basic freedom in our democracy is the freedom to vote. And across the nation, Republicans are pushing legislation to take that away, including in Michigan. In 2020, Michigan voters clearly and resoundingly chose Joe Biden to be our president and Kamala Harris to be our vice president in the largest voter turnout in our nation's history. They won by more than 150,000 votes, and that's 14 times more than Donald Trump's margin was in 2016. Now, I very much appreciate my friend Senator Thune saying he accepted his first loss to the Senate. None of us like to lose. It's not fun. But President Trump should have done the same thing. But instead, Donald Trump's campaign and his allies filed 8 lawsuits in Michigan, lost every single one of them. And in the only case that was appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court, the court declined to hear the case despite having a majority of Republican justices. The people of Michigan voted. Michigan Republicans and Democratic counties verified the vote. And our state, on a bipartisan vote, certified it. And there is no evidence of fraud that would suggest we need legislation to now restrict our voting. So why are Michigan Republicans trying to make it harder to vote with 39 different bills that they've introduced? Well, they just don't like who Michiganders voted for. Think about it. Because they didn't like the result, Michigan Republicans decided to target Michigan voters. As part of a coordinated nationwide assault on this fundamental right that my friend, the late Congressman John Lewis, called precious, almost sacred. That's why we must pass the Freedom to Vote John Lewis Act today. I know that some folks think that any legislation we pass to protect the freedom to vote must be bipartisan to be legitimate. But when it's time to vote, we're told not one Republican will join all 50 Democrats. 50 Democrats in voting for the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act. Therefore, they say the bill shouldn't pass. Yet the attacks on democracy in Michigan and the other states are strictly partisan. In Michigan, Republicans are even using a loophole in our Constitution to go around the governor's veto and take away people's freedom to vote without her capacity to veto the legislation. And they're doing it by a simple majority. And they're doing it with not one Democratic vote, not one in Michigan. But they're still doing it. Republicans are making it harder for people to vote using a simple majority, yet we are told that protecting people's freedom to vote needs a super majority to do it. That makes no sense. And wait, I think I hear Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison rolling over in their graves. Today, we each will choose to protect every American's freedom to vote or allow those supporting the big lie to limit people's freedoms and undermine our democracy. And today, we will choose to stand with our founders and our Constitution as written, or maintain Senate procedures that are seriously broken. It's time to restore the Senate to majority rule as it was intended by the founders, so we can protect the American people's right to vote. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.